Good morning, everyone. If I could ask you to take your seats and silence your cell phones, and we will get the, what's today, March 15th. Wow, 30 days to tax season, and next week is spring. It's moving along. Welcome all to our Hewlett meeting. I'm County Supervisor Mike Wasserman. To my left here is the president of our board and my vice chair, Joe Simidian. And with that, I'll ask Peggy for a, call to order. I just did it, so that's done. We'll do that. And Don, just for introductions, why don't we just start with you and move this way from you to Harry, et cetera.
Great. Good morning. Don Rocha, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Harry Freitas, I'm the Director of the Roads and Airports Department.
Jacqueline Anshano, Director of Planning and Development.
Sylvia Gallegos, Deputy County Executive.
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Thank you all very much for being here. We now move on to item number 2, which is public comment. And when you want to speak under public comment or any agenda item, we ask you to fill out a yellow card here. Peggy, the yellow cards are in the back, or they're in the back and they're bringing them forward? Is that what's going on? So if they want to pull a card, it's right there, and then they can return it in the box. And based on the number of cards that we have for an item, that will determine the number of minutes each speaker will have. I don't have any cards for public comment, so we're going to say nobody wishing to speak about anything not on today's agenda. And we'll finish item number 2. And Supervisor, we'll move on to item number 3, which is approval of the consent calendar, which currently includes items 6 through 12. Do you have a motion?
Move to approve.
Move to approve items 6 through 12. I second that. So, Peggy, that passes unanimously. And we do not have any speaker cards on any of the consent items. So we'll consider all those handled. We now move on to item number 4, receive a report from the Department of Planning and Development relating to land development standards for USC. Stanford University residential subdivision.
Certainly got everybody's attention, Mr.
Hey,
Chairman.
go Trojans. All right.
Okay.
Welcome. Rob, take it away.
Sure. Rob Eastwood, County Planning Manager. What you have before you is a response to a referral from the board from January 29th of this year. That was a hearing in which the board considered a 10-lot subdivision in the San Juan district of the Stanford University campus, a single-family residential neighborhood. At that hearing, many residents showed up and had concerns regarding a few items. One was the prescribed zoning density for that district. Second was a belief of there was a historic character in that district that should be evaluated. And third were concerns regarding public outreach. The staff report you have today is a response to that. The administration's response to those concerns, the board had asked that we come back with some potential procedures, actions, policy options to address those concerns. What the department is recommending is in going forward to begin to implement some of the existing community plan policies that address this neighborhood. There are community plan policies at Stanford that ask that the department look at the development densities, development standards for these zoning districts. That would entail doing a land use survey, looking at the size of houses and setbacks today, and that could inform a rezoning in that district. In addition, as many of the residents believe that there are historic characters in this district, of course, before the county adopts any rezoning, it should be aware if there are historic districts within that area. And we are suggesting that the county move forward with a historic study in tandem with that. Both of those studies would inform a future rezoning, and with that, new development standards could be adopted for the San Juan district, either based on historic characters or not, that could address some of these concerns. And of course, that rezoning effort will be brought back through a public process that goes through the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. Some of the residents had expressed concerns regarding outreach. The county does have an early outreach policy. It does require early in the development process that neighbors are notified of development applications, including subdivisions and single-family homes. We did realize early in the process for that 10-lot subdivision, there was a clerical error noticing, subsequent noticing with that subdivision project did correct that error. We do have opt-in lists. We would encourage neighborhood associations to contact us and get on those lists, but we will continue to adhere to an early outreach policy that notifies neighbors. With that, be available for questions. To my right is Jeff Bradley. He's our Stanford project planner, who knows much more than I could ever have about Stanford at this point, and I know you have a number of public speakers, but we're available as a resource. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Jeff, for being here. Supervisor, it's okay with you. I'm going to turn to our public speakers at this time, or did you wish you had a question with your light on?
I think it would be good to hear from the public speakers first, so please proceed.
Okay, I will do that.
I'll turn
So-
my light off.
Here at the county, we base the time allocated on the number of speaker cards. I've got 10 here. With these 10, I'm going to go with 2 minutes each. But what I ask is that we don't then have a bunch of cards come in afterwards. So anybody who wishes to speak on item number 4, have you filled out and submitted a card?
Mr. Chairman, the only question I would ask is are there some additional cards sitting over there at the corner?
No, those
Nope.
are empties to be picked up to be filled out.
Got it. Thank
Yep.
you.
So has anyone not filled out a card that wishes to speak on item number 4? Okay, then we're going to go with these. And Madam Clerk, we're going to give them 2 minutes each based on the number of cards that I have here. I'm going to call your names. You can come up. Whoever gets there first can start talking first. And if you'll just say who you are so that I can match that up with the card submitted. So Dustin Schroeder, Devon Ryan, Whitney McNair, and Laura Jones. You're the first 4, and come on up. And there's a microphone built into that little podium there, so you can start talking, the time will start. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Dustin Schroeder. I'm an assistant professor in the geophysics department. I got to speak with you guys last time as well. I just wanted to offer to make sure when you're going through this process to say there are many things that are good about faculty housing, especially as young faculty. The increase in density allows us to have a hope of having a home nearby, which is of course great. One of the discussion points that came up is, everyone agrees that it is hard for faculty to find housing in the area, and there are many places that were discussed, and I just want to raise the importance of having housing that is physically near campus for students, especially in light of recent events where we've had a lot of student mental health challenges on campus, where there's a lot of reflection going on of how we as advisors can support our students, both undergrad, as I mentioned before, in the context of Stanford's increasing number of first-gen students, and in terms of grad students we have that we mentor, where we are sort of the first line of defense in terms of students who are struggling. And I just want to make sure that when you're thinking about these goals and weighing concerns of the direction of the university, of historic character of neighborhoods, of people's investments, that the ability to have the advisors who are advising them and their support network when they're either undergraduate or graduate students, that the ability to have those people nearby where they are a walk or a bike ride away is also a value that I hope you keep in mind and aspire to and weigh, hopefully heavily, relative to things like historic character. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Devin Ryan. I'm also a resident in the faculty housing neighborhood of University Terrace. I'm also the HOA president of University Terrace. And I'm basically here to say that there are a lot of younger faculty members who have a lot less institutional wealth and a lot less ability to live near campus by buying a house in Palo Alto, for example. And the Stanford lands and the Stanford housing projects give them an opportunity to live here, which is really important. And unfortunately, a lot of them are very busy trying to get tenure and trying to work, and so they are not always able to be at these meetings. But I just want to represent that there are hundreds of young faculty members who support housing projects that Stanford is making an effort to do. And so when you consider things like historic character versus the ability of the university to increase its housing supply, I just hope you remember that there are actually tons of faculty members that do not have the resources to buy in Palo Alto. And I'm sure everyone knows that it's quite an expensive city to live in. So I just hope that those concerns are really thought about, and that that there are many more people that are represented here physically today that support Stanford's ability to increase its housing supply. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam President.
Good morning. My name is Whitney McNair. I'm the Executive Director of Faculty and Staff Housing for Stanford. A lot of the concern about the future of the homes in the what we call the San Juan Development District stems from a lack of information about what Stanford owns and what Stanford plans to do with what it owns. There have been a lot of numbers tossed around by different people, so we are in the process of developing a short FAQ, so at least we're using a common set of correct information. Stanford owns homes to provide affordable, high-quality transitional housing to eligible faculty and senior-level staff. There are about 940 faculty staff homes on campus, on the whole of campus, of which Stanford or a Stanford affiliate in some capacity owns 98 of them, and those are spread across campus. But I want to focus on the single-family homes in what we call the faculty subdivision, which is the San Juan Development District. Stanford owns 28 of them. Of those 28, one is occupied by the university president, one is the Hanna House, several are rented to faculty, 8 happen to be vacant but are available to rent, 3 are being remodeled, 2 will be demolished as part of the approved Cabrillo Dolores development project, and 1 is currently for sale. That leaves 7 homes that I would call in flux. For these 7, the university is actively trying to decide whether these will be sold directly to faculty, renovated and then sold to faculty, or demolished and replaced. So all of these 7 homes could be a candidate for redevelopment. That's 7 out of 940, or less than 1% of all the homes. If these 7 homes were to be demolished, the university would have to go through and determine if it was a historic resource, design a project, I just have one more sentence, consistent with R1, with only single-family or duplex homes proposed, and early outreach meetings would have to be conducted, and the process, it would have to go through the county public hearing. Thank you.
And Ms. Jones, before you begin, if we could ask Jean McCown, Jessica Von Bork, hi Jessica, and James Sweeney to come forward. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Laura Jones. I'm the University Archaeologist and Director of Heritage Services for Stanford. I manage Stanford's Historic Preservation Program, including review of projects in the single-family neighborhoods. Stanford's residential neighborhoods are protected by current historic preservation programs managed by Stanford and by the county. Home improvement projects for houses more than 50 years old are reviewed for consistency with historic preservation guidelines and neighborhood compatibility. The county's historic preservation ordinance provisions apply in the San Juan Development District as they do countywide. Subdivisions, such as the recently approved project at Cabrillo and Dolores, are subject to county review and approval, including an independent analysis of potential impacts to historic resources. No historic impact was found for that project. And Stanford also has a grassroots historic houses project supported by the Stanford Historical Society that produces books and tours of homes at Stanford. I understand that some homeowners are requesting a historic survey. I've heard from some of them. There are over 770 homes in the San Juan Development District that would be subject to historic resource evaluation. Historic preservation, in my opinion, is most successful where it gains support from residents. The necessary first step before launching a major survey and rezoning effort should be community outreach and education to assess whether such an effort is needed and to ensure that the residents of these neighborhoods understand the county's goals and are able to communicate their concerns to their elected representatives. There is no urgent historic preservation crisis in the San Juan Development District. I urge you to conduct community outreach before making a decision on how to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Jean McCown, Stanford University.
Good morning.
I think you have the cart before the horse here a little bit. The staff report doesn't really articulate what problems the potential historic survey and zoning ideas are intended to address, other than in very broad generalities. So the first step should be to engage with those who could be affected, the 900 plus homeowners, to understand what concerns they have regarding these topics and whether new solutions are needed to address them. You have heard from a small contingent who were activated in opposition to the Cabrillo Dolores proposal, but it is not right to assume without evidence that that is a widely held perspective. Regulating personal residences for historic preservation is virtually always a very challenging exercise. Witness Palo Alto's intense controversy and an election referendum many years ago that undid a city ordinance. Rather than the staff suggestion to move now to exploring possible surveys and zoning actions based on comments made by a number of residents, you should first ask staff to do the community outreach to the faculty homeowner community in its entirety to learn what concerns exist or not, and then bring back that report to you before you choose a direction to proceed. Thank you.
Ms. McCown, if you'll remain there for a minute, we have a question for you.
Sure.
Ms. McCown, I just want to ask, you're here as a representative of the university, yes?
Yes.
Could you tell us, in your understanding, who has zoning authority over the property that we're talking about?
The county, of course. There's R1S zoning.
Thank you.
Was there a
That's
question
it.
about that?
That's it. Thank you.
Ms. Swanberg.
Good morning, supervisors and staff. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Jessica Von Bork. I'm the Director of Land Use at Stanford. The current review process for faculty housing proposals we feel works. It takes into consideration historical significance, architectural style, compatibility, which are all important to the university. These attributes are also further supported by the policies in the Stanford Community Plan. We appreciate the board's approval of the Cabrillo Dolores project, which is a really good example of how the process works. It supported a 2-year outreach process in which Stanford heard neighborhood concerns and addressed them through modifications to density as well as changes to the architectural style. This approval will enable Stanford to support 7 more faculty families to live on campus. In general, the Stanford Community Plan supports densities up to 8 units per acre in the R1S low density zoning district of the faculty staff neighborhoods in which we're talking about today. The community plan states that, as a residential university, Stanford provides a substantial amount of housing, assistance, and housing compared to other employers in the county. Chapter 3, the housing chapter, policy H4, strategy number 2, provides the framework that encourages development of housing on campus at densities that make more efficient use of land and enhance the affordability of housing. The Cabrillo Dolores project accomplished that. As staff noted in the report, there are policies in the community plan that support housing and address concerns about neighborhood compatibility, stating that the two need to be balanced in light of the regional concerns about housing supply and affordability. The Cabrillo Dolores project is a great example of how the county and Stanford both work together to achieve that. We encourage you to think about how reducing the opportunity to provide more units within this area may be counterproductive to what the county really hopes to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sweeney, before you begin, I'd ask Christy Holloway and Carol Ruth to come forward. And that concludes my cards on item number 4. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm Jim Sweeney, president of the Board of Stanford Campus Residential Leaseholders, which I'll call SCRL, and have been so for too many years. SCRL is a 14-person elected board that addresses common issues of the Stanford homeowner community. The SCRL board and the County Board of Supervisors have addressed historical preservation multiple times, beginning in 2003 through 2006, when we worked actually intensively with the county to develop the historic preservation ordinance that currently governs the whole of the unincorporated areas. It seems to be working well as an ordinance. Now, there is strong support on the campus for preservation of our historical heritage. This is evidenced by the work of the Stanford Historical Society and the 7 volumes documenting campus historical homes. Protection is implemented, contrary to a public view that we have on campus, through a system of internal controls. Laura Jones, who you just saw, reviews all relevant proposed external alterations of potentially historic homes, in fact, of every home. She has the ability to say no, which she does, and angers many of the people on our campus by saying no. In addition, under the current historical preservation ordinance, the county approval is required for any demolitions of homes on the county historic registry inventory. Some can seek historical designation. Stanford's never gotten in the way. Some homeowners are unhappy with the current project. Some homeowners are afraid that Stanford will demolish many buildings in the old part of community and build multifamily complexes. But others, including me, can I have 15 seconds?
No, you can't.
No,
You can
okay.
finish your sentence, but I need to be fair to everyone.
Okay, but others believe that these changes are already precluded by the R1S zoning rules, the existing historical preservation ordinance, and by CEQA. So what we ask, come to the campus and talk with us in person up there.
I'm Christy Holloway. I've lived on the campus for 40 years. And this morning, I believe Peggy Doyle has copies of a letter from Shute, Mahaley, and Weinberger, and I hope they've been have they been distributed? Yes. Okay, our attorney was going to be here, and because of the time limitations, he decided coming from San Francisco wasn't going to be worth the dollars and cents of a community group. I want to tell you on behalf of the Stanford community homeowners, we appreciate the staff's and land development regulations that they have presented to be adopted for faculty neighborhoods. But it is concerning that the staff is suggesting that more stringent zoning is needed only if specific houses or an area is deemed historic. The character and ambiance of the Stanford's faculty neighborhoods are worthy of preservation regardless of their historic status. In fact, the community plan explicitly calls for the recognition and enhancement of the character of faculty residential areas. Given that the GUP will authorize campus growth and land use for the next 2 decades, it is imperative that steps be taken now to ensure the future development does not adversely affect the established neighborhoods. We believe that it would be reasonable for the county to include a new policy in the community plan, such that provides for the preservation and character and integrity of established campus residential neighborhoods, including compatible densities, setbacks, design, and landscaping. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Holloway, just so you know, we have the 6-page letter from the law firm that you referenced in our file.
I am so glad that you have it, and I'm sorry he wasn't able to be here today.
No problem. Thank you. Ms. Ruth, your bat and cleanup.
Good morning, and thank you for hearing our comments. I think in terms of what to do going forward, it's important to take a look at the different standards that are applied to homeowners versus the Stanford developers, and to see what we could do in terms of equalizing the standards. That might go a long way to solving the issue without having to deem areas historic. And I'd like to point out a couple examples. The San Juan Cabrillo Dolores subdivision is a prime case in point. The neighborhood it's in consists of many years old homes on lots of 1 to 2 acres with large setback requirements that are enforced by Stanford's own residential policies. However, Stanford's new development has applied a double standard. Stanford does not follow its own rules, but reverts to the baseline county setbacks of 5 feet on the sides with small rear and front setbacks. Typical required front setbacks for homeowners on this neighborhood are as much as 65 feet in the front and side setbacks of 25 feet or more. Disregard for the neighborhood's historical setbacks and Stanford's own internal zoning has a significant negative impact on the values of the homes and the historical character of the neighborhood. In addition, this development sets a precedent for Stanford to continue these unequal practices in the future. It is imperative for homeowners to abide by these regulations, so why does Stanford exempt itself from its own regulations? Another double standard is that homeowners must sell to a new owner within 2 years of vacating the property. Stanford, on the other hand, has acquired approximately 28 historic homes in the neighborhood and left them vacant and deteriorating for as many as 6 or more years. With the current housing shortage, this issue needs a critical review. Stanford homeowners may not subdivide a large property into parcels. However, the Cabrillo Dolores project takes 2.5 lots and divides them into 10. And I'll have to stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That concludes the public comment on our items. Supervisor Simonian, would you like to make comments at this time? Would you like to hear staff respond to anything they've heard?
Why don't we
If
let
they have anything.
staff respond if they've got any response they'd like to offer, but then I do have both questions and comments.
Rob, any comments that
Sure,
you or Jeff may have regarding anything you've heard that we should know?
One clarification. I think one speaker spoke to that the zoning study would only address homes that are historic. I did want to clarify that the intent of the study would determine what, if there's historic character to the districts, zoning study would go forward regardless. If the historic study informs how to change the zoning, that would happen. But I would say if properties are historic or not, that would not exclude the county from going forward with new zoning standards. I hope that clarifies.
If I could interject to this point, it does, and it's helpful, Mr. Eastwood and Ms. Anshano, because as I read the staff report, I think I had the same conclusion that some members of the public did, which was that we were talking almost exclusively about historic heritage issues. And then in your opening remarks today, I thought, oh, no, we are talking about a broader analysis of zoning issues, density issues, compatibility issues, over and above the questions of historic integrity. Ms. Anshano, I see you leaning in, if through the chair, if that's okay.
Please.
If I may, yes, that is correct. We're looking at the issues of the land regulations as far as density, setbacks, regardless of the historic designation of the areas.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, let me say first, I don't have, this may be one of the few times you get to hear me say this, I don't have an opinion about what the end result of this exercise should be.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I don't have an opinion about what the end of this exercise should be.
Okay.
If I did, I would share it. You know I'm not reticent about sharing those opinions when I have them. I do know that when we had the recent discussion before us about the subdivision, I felt conflicted, frankly, because I thought in fairness to the applicant, which was the university, we were obliged to follow the rules on the books. We have a general plan, we have a community plan, we have zoning, and the applicant came in and said, we believe we've got an application that is consistent with all of that, and ultimately I concluded that that was in fact the case, whether some of my constituents and the neighbors agreed or not. That being said, I thought that that conversation did raise a number of legitimate concerns about whether or not the rules in place were the right rules to have in place. What kind of impacts did following those rules have? And so I do think it's appropriate for us to have this conversation. And I'm not sure if it was a direct quote from the Stanford Community Plan, but as is often the case in general plan and community plan documents, there's some tension between and among the various plan policies. So, but policy in the Stanford Community Plan, H13 does say recognize and enhance the character of existing residential areas for faculty, staff, and students. And I think, one of the threshold questions is, does 8 units to the acre do that for all of the areas that are zoned 8 units to the acre? I think it would be helpful if we brought this back to the committee again in April. And I say that only in part because I think, Mr. Bradley, you're planning to have conditions of approval fully fleshed out, Ms. Anshano, by April 30th, if I remember correctly. At least that's a target. So if there was anything that was relevant to the conditions of approval on the community plan, that would be, on the GUP, that would be timely. Just to be clear with everybody, I don't think we're going to get all this sorted out between now and the time we take action on the GUP. So I don't want to raise false expectations. I do think, however, there may be some portions of the GUP or the conditions of approval attached to the GUP that deal with these issues, and we don't want to miss that opportunity. That being said, I agree with the comments about the importance of community outreach, and just to provide some reassurance to folks, I've been doing this for a while now, And I've learned over the years that, you know, you're going to hear one thing from one group of residents at one meeting, and you'll hear something else from a different group of residents at the next meeting. So I think we do need a more formal, extended, and thoughtful process about how to engage all the folks who are part of this area and get a sense for what their views and values are as well.
So let me ask a question, if I may. You mentioned an April 30th date. Our next meeting of Hewlett is April 18th. What did you expect back on the April 18th?
Well, one of the things that I think would be helpful is if we get some kind of an overlay, here I come, planners, if we could get some kind of overlay about what if the rest of this San Juan area was in fact fully developed at 8 units an acre, what would that look like? Like, let's literally take a grid and put one on top of the other and say, here's what that would look like.
If I may, Supervisor, that may be premature for us to do that in April. We're working through the GUP, and the GUP covers the development of Stanford. It would be best if we completed that process and then address this issue after that, instead of putting, I think someone said, the cart before the horse a little bit. So that we can analyze all of the information as it's developed.
You can't solve a problem until you've identified what the problem is, or even if there is a problem. So I'm not suggesting that we would have an answer in April. What I'm suggesting is that visually it would be helpful to just see what would it look like if we took all that acreage and subjected it to full development at 8 units to the acre. I'm just asking for a tool to help us have that conversation, not a conclusion then. And I say that, and I'm going to, provide a personal example. 8 units to the acre means that we're talking about what I'd call sort of typical suburban subdivision lots of about 5,500 square feet per home. I happen to live in a neighborhood of suburban subdivision lots that is exactly at that standard. We've got a lot of 2-story houses that have been popping up with big basements. This is a Palo Alto phenomenon. And the one that went up most proximate in my own experience is a absolutely beautiful home, but too much home for the lot in terms of the neighborhood compatibility issues that folks here have raised. If you look at many of these neighborhoods, it's frankly it's not compatible with the existing neighborhood to think about that level or intensity of development in my observation. But I would be helped in that observation and analysis if I had some way of sort of just looking to see what does that kind of density mean in those neighborhoods. So again, I haven't come to a conclusion about it, but I can't advance my thinking on it if I don't have some kind of tools to see what does that really look like. I do want to underscore, Mr. Chairman, I know we got some time concerns this morning. I do underscore, it's for the record, we're not just talking historic heritage here.
Correct.
And by the way, for the folks who spoke to historic heritage, Mr. Bradley, my understanding is that our Historic Heritage Commission has expressed some concern about the rigor of the historic heritage analysis that we've experienced thus far. Yes?
Yes. Supervisor Smitty, and there has been robust discussion at the Historic Heritage Commission about the Stanford survey, and we are working through those issues now.
Good. Well, and the next thing I'll say, Mr. Chairman, is, and the reason I asked Ms. McGowan the question about zoning authority, and unfortunately she's had to leave or step away, is because we're stuck with this whether we want it or not. I mean, we've had this unique circumstance of a private university in an unincorporated portion of our county, but as folks reminded us at the last go-around on this topic, we're their local government. That's just, as Ms. McGowan herself said, that's just a matter of fact. That's not something that's debated. So we do have to ask ourselves, all right, we put zoning in place previously. Now that that zoning has been used to intensify one neighborhood, are there lessons we should learn from that experience? And I don't know yet what those lessons might be. And again, Ms. Unshana, that's why I'm asking for some tools, not a conclusion in April, but some tools to help think that through so we can give clearer direction going forward there.
Okay, Jack, if I may, you've heard what the supervisor was referring to and requesting. What is doable by the April 18th meeting?
We can bring a depiction. We just want to be clear that it's just a tool. It's not what we're proposing. We'll just bring a depiction. The land development standards that would be appropriate for these areas needs to be looked at relative to site coverage, setbacks, separate from the historic. It just needs to be addressed. So Supervisor Simidian made that statement. That is true. That is separate. Now, while there may be some information that can assist us in developing those standards, the historic is not what drives that.
Understood. The other thing that I think it would be helpful to get a little more staff comment on at an April meeting, Mr. Chairman, is the issue that's been raised about having some sort of group of residents that might be identified to for engagement, participation with our planning process. In some ways, I just want to underscore the in some ways similar to the San Martin Planning Advisory Commission or Council that you're familiar with in the South County. Does not have decision-making authority, but it is essentially a resource for our planning staff and also for the Planning Commission and as it comes up to the Board of Supervisors. I'm going to, and I mean no disrespect to anybody here, but one of the challenges is the folks on the campus, in my experience over a great many years now, are like most folks, they get engaged when there's an issue and they want to go back and live their very busy lives, as we heard earlier, when there isn't. So it's tough sometimes to design a participatory model that engages people other than at moments of tension around land use. But I do think this is a particular challenge, again, as you experienced with the unincorporated area in South County. This is an unincorporated area of substantial development. It's a unique case. And then the question is, given the role that the university itself plays in its development decisions, how do we make sure there's a point of access for community members? And it's easy enough for them to say, could we please meet with our district supervisor? But I think they're understandably saying, look, all the decisions are going to be made by 5 members of the Board of Supervisors. How do we have a role in that process? So if we can on that, I would appreciate that as well.
You're nodding yes?
We'll bring our thinking on that.
Okay, see what you can bring back at that time. Okay, thank you. Rob, Jeff, anything else to make comment on? Supervisor, this was to receive a report. We don't even need a motion on that. Is there anything else you wish to add?
Well, I think what I'd like to do is offer a motion that says we receive the report and provide direction to staff to report back to us at the April Hewlett meeting with the information that has been requested.
Yep, your comments and requests are on record.
Thank you.
All right, that'll conclude item number 4. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is regarding the Sanborn Master Plan. Same system, everybody. If you wish to speak on this item, you'll fill out a yellow card over there. I have one item here, one card from Sylvia Carroll. I invite you up at this time to speak. And again, final call for anybody else wishing to speak on item number 5 on today's agenda. Fill out a card.
Good morning. I'm Sylvia Carroll. I'm speaking specifically to the Welchhurst property. I, with others, managed the Sanborn Park Hostel for 31 years, starting with building improvements, opening the first portion of the hostel in July 1979, and Supervisor Simidian's father was one of our volunteers. Did you know that?
I did.
All right.
And I should just say, I should just say thank you is actually what I should just say. Thank you.
We served over 157,000 overnight guests of all ages coming from 99 foreign countries in all states and territories of the U.S. Throughout its life, the Sanborn Park Hostel was the lowest priced full-service hostel in the U.S., overnight fees starting at $3, ending up at $14, at half price for all children. In many travel guides and letters sent to us, people said it was the best hostel in the United States. And I think it was, with a beautiful living room, dining room, marvelous kitchen, and a great building and grounds. Besides overnight guests, we welcome nonprofits to have daytime meetings, $35 a day, that's all, for full use of kitchens and telephones and everything. We also welcomed weddings, 5 months of every year, every weekend, up to 200 guests, $300 total, which you must know is a very, very low price. But now I must quarrel with the report you have read. I presume you've read it. There are statements of inadequate electrical, mechanical, and plumbing. That's not true. All improvements were signed off by the county building inspectors. When the Loma Prieta earthquake happened, not one single bit of damage to the buildings. If you give me enough time, I'll even tell you about all that. The ADA was adequate, and now they're saying it isn't.
Your time has expired. Is there a ending comment that you wish to make? A sentence or two more. Yep.
I can say something else?
Yes.
Okay. Well, very briefly. Reference to the barn or garage, it's in 3 different terms. This is actually a very nice meeting room, comfortable, available for groups to have meetings. I don't understand in this report why there's so much emphasis on revenue generation.
Thank you. I need to stop you there, but
I do have a quick question that I hope is helpful, and I think it'll be helpful to us. And therefore, you would like us to do what?
I would like the building to be saved. I would like it to be used in a reasonable way, and I would like there not to be so much emphasis on, oh, well, we must generate revenue, and I'm concerned that these estimates of the cost of updating things are way, way, way too high. When we started our work...
Thank you. I'm going to get in trouble with the chair if I let my question go on any longer.
Thank you.
But thank you. I got it now. That's why.
Thank you.
I think he came up with that question in honor of his father working there.
Yes.
All right. Now we're going to turn to staff for your report, please.
If I may just give a brief introduction,
Yes.
and I'll introduce staff quickly. So thank you, supervisors. The department is very pleased to present this draft master plan, which will guide the development and enhancement of the recreational experiences at Sanborn Park, including opening areas that were in the core of the park that were previously closed to public access. The site known as the Christensen property, a former nursery site that was acquired in 1990. In the 1990s has not been open to the public as of yet, so this plan will help us move towards enhancing recreational opportunities and enhancing the existing opportunities by moving into this previously closed area. As an outcome of, the department has put a lot of effort in outreach and engaging the community and members of the public in the master planning process through community meetings, public meetings, and workshops. As an outcome of those meetings, many of the concerns during the planning process have been engaged or have been addressed through deep, in-depth engagement and discussions. As staff will further explain, the master plan focused on 4 core areas of the park, including historic resources, but also seeking partnership opportunities to preserve and protect and interpret the history of the park. One of the unopened areas of the park that was originally proposed as a family-friendly bike park is no longer being considered in the master plan. Finally, in the core of the park, again, the Christensen property, it was really an area that we were looking for to enhance the existing recreational opportunities, primarily around camping. Currently, the RV site at Sanborn Park is in a parking lot, so to be able to move that into a more natural setting is one of the goals of the plan. So it's really to address existing uses and enhancing those existing uses. And with that, I'll have staff give a brief introduction. With us today, we have Annie Thompson, Interim Deputy Director, Kim Brosseau, the Senior Planner and the Project Manager, and John Folkowski, the Interim Principal Planner.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. The Parks Department is here to present the draft Sanborn County Park Master Plan. The plan provides the department with guidance for the development of the park in accordance with the mission and vision of the department, including opportunities for partnerships, reuse of historic buildings, and opening new property to the public. While the park has long provided public access and facilities for park users, amenities need to be increased and adapted to accommodate existing and future recreational demands. Sanborn Park is approximately 3,500 acres and located in the Santa Cruz Mountains between the city of Saratoga and Skyline Boulevard. The park offers opportunities for hiking, camping, biking, horseback riding, and picnicking. The department has various day-use sites available for reservation for weddings, group picnics, and other special events. There are also historic sites in the park, including the Dyer and Welchhurst areas. 3 environmental education-based groups are located in the park: West Valley College, Youth Science Institute, and Walden West Outdoor Education Center. These environmental education and college programs use the park as an outdoor classroom. The plan concentrates on 4 focus areas: Sanborn Core Use Area, which is the central hub of the park and where the historic Dyer House is located. The former nursery area, a 57-acre site which was once a former nursery that is currently closed to the public. The Welchhurst area, which contains a historic house listed on the National Register of Historic Places. And the former Christmas Tree Farm area, a former tree farm near Skyline Boulevard that is currently closed to the public. After review and analysis of the existing conditions, opportunities, and constraints, as well as public and stakeholder input, the department drafted recommendations for the 4 focus areas. Recommendations for these focus areas include the following. For the former Christmas Tree Farm area, development of the former Christmas Tree Farm area for recreation purposes is not recommended as part of this plan. However, it is recommended that the park continue its existing partnership with West Valley College's Park Management Program for vegetation management. The Sanborn Core Use Area. Recommendations include expanding educational and recreational opportunities, improving connections to other areas of the park, and maximizing existing facilities for day use recreational opportunities. Recommendations also include the use of the Dyer House for staff offices as a visitor center, and the relocation of the RV and upper walk-in campsites to the former nursery area. The lower walk-in campsites will remain as a new group campsite. For the former nursery area, recommendations include relocated campgrounds and a small number of additional RV, tent sites, and cabins, as well as other secondary uses for both active and passive recreation, such as a small pump track, bike skills area, or fishing. The campground use will be primarily operated either by the Parks Department or as part of a future partnership. In the Welchhurst area, recommendations include the continued stabilization of the Welchhurst House and reuse of the area in collaboration with the future partnership opportunity. A mitigated negative declaration and initial study has been prepared to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. The document is currently being circulated as part of the 30-day public review period. The initial study helps determine whether project impacts are likely to cause a significant effect on the environment. After analysis of the project, the Parks Department determined that the project could be fully mitigated to a less than significant level, and the project would not cause a significant effect on the environment. The initial study mitigated negative declaration for the master plan has been prepared at a programmatic level, and future detailed development of the former nursery area will require additional design, environmental analysis, and public input. While the analysis for the environmental review and master plan has been completed for possible uses at the maximum potential scale of development, future development may be less than what has been analyzed in the master plan. The County Board of Supervisors will consider the master plan and the CEQA document jointly for approval. This concludes staff presentation. The PowerPoint presentation is included in your packet, and I'm happy to show all or part of that presentation if you would like.
Thank you. And John Kiminani, thank you very much for being here. Yes, we do have that. Supervisor Simitian, any questions of staff? And thank you for that report.
Where are we in the environmental process?
So we began circulation of the CEQA document on March 8th, and that will run for 30 days through April 7th.
And if we receive the report today, Mr. Chairman, what else, if anything, are we being asked to do?
That's it. Don, you called it a draft master plan, and I guess it's that technically until it's approved?
Correct.
Is that the way that's done?
That is correct.
Okay, so anything else you need from this committee, or otherwise this goes to the board?
And then it'll go to the full board, as well as the CEQA findings will be part of the final master plan for the board to
Understood.
act on the CEQA findings.
So when would it go to the full board?
We're hoping to go to the full board in.
We plan to go on April 23rd to the board. However, the County Parks Department will address any comments received during the CEQA process. So if something, for example, were to come up that required additional environmental analysis, we would need to do that. Otherwise, our plan is for going to the board on April 23rd.
Yeah, I know my staff had some back and forth with park staff on this subject, and you know, I gather this has been the process historically. Okay. But here's the challenge that I face as an elected official. I'm being asked to weigh in on a document on which we have not yet completed the environmental work. And, you know, again, that may be the way it's been done, but, you know, that's doesn't strike me as sort of good planning practice. You know, I'm glad to hear we're only being asked to receive the report, because one of the things I could not do is vote to recommend or oppose the plan going forward, because we don't have the, I mean, I believe, if I understood correctly, we haven't even finished the comment process, yes?
Correct.
So we're still waiting to hear from members of the public. We've got, you know, a letter from, you know, a handful of our nearby residents, I gather, expressing concern about part of this. And, you know, we went to staff, the planning staff, and asked for whether they had a different take on the matter. And they scrambled, and I would say thank you. But, you know, that means that even as they scrambled, I think we got the information yesterday in my office after 4:30. So, again, a little tough then to roll in the next morning on something and feel like you can weigh in with an opinion.
May I interject for a minute?
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Rocha, I understand his concern about approving something without our having the environmental, the public comment, et cetera. So I see two alternatives. One, we forward it to the board, as you said. He may abstain at this time. Whatever he chooses is up to him. And then at the board, we'd have an option to approve or not approve it based on the environmental information we received and the community feedback. The alternative would be to delay another month here based on the deadlines I believe you just gave me of when you expect CEQA to be finished and public comment to be done, and then bring it back here so that you have all the information. Does that mess up a timeline of yours?
No, it does not. And we can also work with your offices, you know, for the future as we bring things back to Hewlett Committee.
So Supervisor, that said, would you like to defer this to the following meeting, and we'll have
I'd
the
like
environmental information?
Short answer is yes.
There you go.
Longer answer is yes, and. Yes, and I'd like to have a little more conversation now so that I'm not raising things for the first time at that April meeting. So under the old system, which we're not going to follow, or the old timeline, this would have come to us on the 23rd in April at the full board, if I heard correctly, because we would have, and I'm walking through this, Mr. Chairman, because I don't want to put parks in the position of hearing this again and again. I want to see if we can get our schedules synced in future for environmental purposes. So right now, if I heard correctly, is it the comment period that ends 30 days after March the 7th?
Correct. It ends April 7th.
So April 7th, okay. And then there may or may not be comments to which you then might have to respond. And how long does that process typically take, just so I understand?
It depends on the nature of comments. If we receive one letter versus 100, and then depending on what those questions are and how much additional research or putting together those comments would take.
Yeah, I think before we forward something to the full board, and I'm not talking about just this project, I'm talking about any others, this committee should see it with the environmental process complete. Because what I worry about is that if we don't do it that way, when things get to the full, if we sort of say, well, we're moving things along through the process and we're going to bring it to the committee without full environmental work done, then maybe the full environmental work is done the day or two before we get to the full board. And not only have we not had the conversation here we should have had, but it becomes difficult to respond at the last minute when we've got literally a 3,000-page packet with 100+ items on it.
So bringing it back to this committee after we receive the full environmental report is agreeable with you?
It is, and my reason for saying that is it sounds to me like it's theoretically possible that that work won't all be done by our next April meeting.
You can't predict that.
We can't predict that, but then if that work isn't done, then it would be, we would bring it to the following board meeting. We would just postpone when we brought it till it was complete.
Thank you very much.
Then let me ask about the hostel, which somebody raised a question about. This is the Welsh Hurst House, yes?
Yes.
And the plan for that again is what?
We're looking at a potential reuse of the structure. We would need to build it up, bring it up to code per today's standards, and we're looking at future partnership opportunities, but we don't have anything specifically identified yet.
Nice.
And I get that Parks is in a box because you've got limited funds and we're always jamming you to create more revenue. That being said, the mission of the organization is not to be a cash register, but to serve the public. So your thoughts about the loss of opportunities for the public if we go down this path?
So the plan leaves it open for both. So what we're looking for is a partnership opportunity. As you know, historic resources take a lot of investment. So many times, especially for historic preservation, there might be a revenue generation piece because in working with a partner, we're going to be looking for them to invest into a historic resource, which has a lot more costs associated with it. So to be able to implement, preserve it properly, if somebody was able to come in that's providing a recreational opportunity and the investment that can be balanced and leveraged with the Parks Department, it doesn't have to be a revenue generating opportunity. We just left the door open for both. But again, usually investments into historic resources are very costly, and there might be a revenue generation piece associated with it because of that initial investment in the capital.
In part because of the political climate in the country today, and in part because of the brouhaha around the bike issue, there's some lack of trust out there in the community. How widespread it is, I don't know, and I wouldn't presume to guess. But I think when we toss off a yet-to-be-defined parameter like that, it's going to create some angst out there in the community. And I hope we learned our lesson about sort of outreach and engagement with the community on these issues from the bike trail, because that was not our county's best moment.
Bumpy road.
Yeah, thank you. And it was not our county's best moment. The other thing I want to say is that, again, I fully respect the fact that, our board and the county leadership has sort of put you in this tension of, cash generation as well as public services. But, I don't want us to be waking up every morning thinking about how we can monetize our park system. And I know you don't. And I feel that's true of your staff, but I just want to make sure that we don't find ourselves creeping down that path, no pun intended.
And that was on the record too,
Yeah, absolutely. If I can interject that, because this is a programmatic EIR and we are a CEQA document, mitigated negative DEC or negative DEC, if whatever we plan to do for the purpose of Welsh Hurst, that would have to be looked at more specifically and be part of a public process as well. So it wouldn't be just blanketly approved as an open-ended thing with this master plan.
Thank you. So I think direction we have, Supervisor, is to ask Parks to bring this back when the environmental process is concluded. And then we look forward to moving it forward to the board.
So moved, if you'd like a motion on the record.
Thank you. Motion and second. Passes unanimously. Thank you all. Items 6 through 12 were handled through consent, Supervisor, so we're going to adjourn this meeting, and thank you all committee members. Hi there, Joe. To Thursday, April 18th at 10 a.m. in the same building. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.